I wanted to talk with you about the crisis that nobody sees coming. Doesn't matter where you're located in the world, this will affect you. Just because you're located in a different geographic location does not mean that you're exempt from anything. This is global. These are global issues. So I want to take this time to talk about 3 very important problems that are becoming obvious, becoming bigger, and let's break them down. The first thing here is, of course, that we're living in an increasingly more globalized world. And what does that mean? Well, it means that there's a lot more cultural mixing going on today than there was 100 years ago. I mean, these things also happened during the Roman Empire times, big time. But what we're seeing today is something very different, where we're seeing people from all over the world going to certain places, integrating and living there long term, and eventually becoming citizens. So this is a great concept for sure. But one of the problems that I'm seeing with this whole globalism stuff, moving between countries, rotating or establishing yourself in a new country where everything's different. Cultures are different, and there's nothing wrong about that. And I think we personally have to accept each culture for what it is. I think that's really important. At the end of the day, we cannot change the core of people. The core of people is who they are. And people have worked for years and often decades to become the person who they are today. And it has to be said, in certain places, there's more cultural tolerance than in other places. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you're an immigrant from Asia and you're coming to Europe. Guess what? Chances of you being culturally accepted in Europe are much greater than if you were to migrate to a country that's like in the Middle East or that's like in Northern Africa, simply because certain cultures are more tolerant than others. It is just what it is. Let me give you an example. For instance, if you want to marry a Muslim woman, then you have to be Muslim yourself. This is obvious, if you know about it, but if you don't know about it, like, what? I didn't know that that was even possible. I didn't know that there was such a law in place. There is a law in place for that. There's one country, in the Muslim world where a Muslim woman is allowed to marry a non-Muslim man. And that country is Tunisia. It's the only country in the world that does that because they had big revolution going on. There was the Arab Spring taking place many years ago, and Tunisia was pretty much the initiator of the Arab Spring. A lot of people don't know that, but this is just how it happened. And Tunisia is one of the countries closest to Europe, and it had European influence in many ways, France, and so forth. It's really interesting to see how the mentality in Tunisia changed. It's important that if you go live in a place that is multicultural, it's really important to have an open mind, and it's really important to accept people for who they are. At the end of the day, we're all people, and at the end of the day, we can live together happily and peacefully, assuming that we're willing to tolerate others, that we're willing to accept others for who they are. That's the key lesson. As much as you have to accept yourself for who you are, the person who you are, we have to accept others for who they are as well. And this holds true for all cultures, all religions, and all people. So nobody is exempt from this. Nobody should be exempt from this. It is true that in certain places, that mentality still needs to change, where foreigners are coming in and they're expected to be 100% compliant with the religion of that place. And if you're coming from a country where that's not the case, you're like, why are they doing this? This is not happening in my own home country. This is not happening there. But I'm here now and I'm expected to change my culture, change my religion and all of that. And so I feel like this might be one of the biggest issues that certain places have to overcome for us all to live happily. And one of the best things we can do is to be accepting. The religion has nothing to do with the quality of a person. There are good people everywhere. There are good-hearted people everywhere. In every culture, in every religion, every country, there are good people. So we have to accept people for who they are, their beliefs, right? Their thinking, their way of life. And now you might think, well, that doesn't really apply because if you move to a country, you have to become part of that country. I totally agree with that. You have to make an effort to adapt. You have to make an effort to integrate. That's very important, but religious beliefs might still vary for your entire life. You might not be able to change that. And not even like the first generation of the people that live in that country, like that were born in that country, they might still have the thinking, the beliefs of their parents. Why? Because they're being educated by immigrant parents. And that's totally fine too. But we have to accept people for who they are. Because why? We're living in a globalized world. This is important for peace and prosperity. If we want to continue the globalized path, then this is a mandatory requirement. And we have to do that in every place. In some places, that needs to get better. And also, I feel like certain people have to be more tolerant. We have to have more empathy. And that's for all of us, people from all cultures, all religions, all countries, all ethnicity groups, for all of us, right? We have to have an open heart, and we have to understand that people are different. Well, people are the same. They're still different. They're still different because why? They had a different childhood. They lived in a different country. They grew up in a different country, or they were just raised differently, whatever, right? People are different. And so we have to accept that, and we have to look at this, the bigger picture. What's the bigger picture? And I think the bigger picture is to live in happiness and to live in peace. How we can live in peace and happiness is when we are completely open with ourselves. And I feel like that's also the key. Like, if you can accept your own screw-ups, if you can forgive yourself for the things you've done wrong, it's one of the hardest things to do, right? If you can forgive yourself for your biggest screw-ups, you are on a path to probably unlimited happiness. This is one of the most difficult things people have to deal with. And I'm just pointing this out now because, again, it's important that we accept people for who they are. 2, we're going through a massive birth rate crisis. Birth rates have been declining. Fertility rates have been declining. And this is not just the case in Europe and North America. We're seeing this in Latin America, Asia, and even in Africa in certain countries, right? Fertility rates, they're going down. And so this might be one of the biggest crises ever for the simple reason that we need to reproduce. From a human perspective, from the whole life perspective, the whole purpose of life is to give life purpose, to give life meaning. And one of the biggest things you can do to give your life a meaning is to start a family. And this has nothing to do with religion, race, ethnicity, or anything. This is for every person, right? Whatever a unity means for you. And some people don't want to start a family, and that's understandable. Every person can do whatever they want to do. But in order for us to thrive, in order for us to make it, there has to be a certain change in thinking happening very soon. And we have to become more communal again, and this is also true for different places, different people. Like, we have to value people more. But anyway, we're going to get to this. It's actually point 3. This is even potentially more important than this. The fertility rates have been declining in Western countries. In Western Europe, they're low. Like in Italy, they are low. Fertility rates are down already for decades in many countries, right? They're down. We want to be able to pass certain things on to future generations, And unless we are doing this, we're doing things that are just good for us. And this might not be good for the planet. And like I said, this might not be good for future generations. But if our thinking changes, and now we're thinking of future generations, how we can preserve certain things, how we can act more responsibly, more reasonably, if we do that, then I feel like the world is our oyster. So many good things are on the horizon because we're not just thinking about ourselves. We're not just coming from an egotistical point of view. We're not just acting egotistically. We are now acting based on what we think is best for our planet, for our future generations, and for the whole world combined. And this is truly the ultimate purpose. If you can do that, if we can do that, and I'm talking to all of us here, if we can do this, then I think we can prosper in this generation. If you're a millennial, if you're Generation Z, Generation X, it doesn't matter, right? If you're a boomer, it's never too late, right? If we can do that, if our current generations can do that, if during this current time we can do that, then good things are on the horizon. If we refuse to think about future generations, and if we just take a look at what we want internally, and if all our actions are predicated on what's important for us to be happy and for us to thrive, but we forget about the most important component of all, preserving for future generations, then we might be in for a lot of trouble. I'm not even kidding you. We might be in for a lot of trouble. Our ancestors, they worked their butts off. Did they make mistakes? Hell yeah. Did they do things right? Hell yeah. And this is what life is all about. Life is all about personal choices. Life is all about doing things right, doing things wrong, learning from the things you did wrong, hopefully not making the same big mistake twice. This is what life is all about. But life is also about preserving for future generations. And if we're just coming from a superficial materialistic perspective that we only care about acquiring for ourselves and not putting good things out there that will allow others to enjoy life too, to live a life and to preserve humanity pretty much, then we're in trouble, which leads us to the most important thing of all. Humanity is in decline. And this is a very hard topic to talk about, trust me. This goes deep. Like when I talk about this seriously, like my heart is hurting because humanity has gone down in so many countries. Like individualism is, I would say, the cause of this problem. Individualism is the cause of the problem. If you take a look at certain societies that have preserved humanity so much better than we have in the West. So yes, I'm pointing the finger at Western countries in that sense because this individualistic approach that's been spreading across so many countries and has been spreading over so many generations now, and it continues to spread, is the very root of the course. Individualism, just taking a look at myself, this and this and that, like what materialistic things can I acquire to be happy? Well, guess what? Happiness does come from the inside, but true happiness does not come from materialistic things. Like if the only way that you can be happy is when you purchase something new, guess what? You're never going to be happy because you're always going to be in that cycle looking for something new to fulfill your happiness again. And if you're always looking for something new to fulfill your happiness, you're always going to be looking, right? You have your happiness tied to the wrong things and you're wanting to be happy for the wrong reasons, right? If happiness comes from contribution, from purpose, then we're truly in a state where we can impact, where we can make a difference. And this is what life should be about, in my opinion. Like, we need more leaders that are willing to make a difference in a humane way, make a difference for humanity, not just for their own personal pockets that are already filling up with more money. We have companies that are not paying any taxes. We have companies that are preserving capital because they want to have a big exit instead of using that money to change the world for the better, to change humanity for the better. We have companies that have capital reserves that are insane, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're set up in countries where they're not paying any taxes, and they're building these capital reserves to even higher levels so they can eventually sell their company for more money so the company has a higher value, right? It's all about the balance sheet. But is this really the way for us to live, to make a difference, to just be more humane? It probably isn't, right? How many people do you know that really care about the poor? How many people do you know? And when I say caring, I'm not just talking about donating money or giving money away. No, it's just genuinely care. Like they want the poor to do better. How many people do you know? Very few people, right? Most of us, we just care about our daily agenda. We just care about what's inside our little box making us happy, but we don't care about how other people feel. Very few people of us care about that. But if we can change that, I think the world will prosper in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. And we can change that. We can initiate that change because that change comes from the inside. Every single person watching this video, you can initiate that change, even if it can just change how you treat the people closest to you. This will make a huge difference. Trust me about that. If you can do that, then you're already on the path onto something great. I'm not even kidding you. Like if you can do that, you're already much further up the ladder than 90% of people that don't give a damn about others. So we have to be responsible. We have to think about future generations, and we have to preserve what's been given to us by our ancestors, and we have to preserve this for future generations. If not, we're just acting egotistically, selfishly, and inconsiderately, and we should not do that because life is a gift. Like the fact that we are here in this physical shape, form, whatever you want to call it, is a gift. We have been presented with this gift, and the question is, what are we going to do with it? Are we willing to make some sacrifices to be more fulfilled from the inside, right? To have more purpose. Yes, we want to make money. Yes, we want to be individualistic, and there's nothing wrong with it. But if something is blown out of proportion, and we're talking about the polarization of individualism, reaching the opposite side, it's like 180-degree shift. Now, this is like a scale from 0 to 100, and you can choose wherever you want to be on that scale. You don't have to be at 100. You can be at like 20 or 30. You can be at 50. The key in life is being balanced. And so many people don't get that. Obtaining wealth, that's all they care about, but they don't care about balance, being balanced. And this is something that I wanted to stress in this video. And caring about humanity is something that is in the balanced package. And if we can do that, we can be truly, truly successful. As always, I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think about this topic. This is a burning issue that we're having now, right? The globalism, how we can solve certain issues, cultural differences, and just coming from a point of acceptance. Then we talked about fertility rates, birth rates, right? We got to work on that. And then, of course, we also talked about humanity, how we can preserve humanity and how we can preserve for future generations. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.